Well, hello everybody and welcome aboard. It's Rob from PMDG. This will be the first episode in the tutorial series for the Douglas DC-6 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. First one's going to be about cockpit orientation. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we are on the flight deck of the PMDG Douglas DC-6. If you're used to flying jets, a view like this probably comes as a bit of a shock to you. A whole lot of round dials, buttons, switches, and knobs, and that sort of thing. The point of this episode is to help get you oriented, show you that there's really actually a little bit of methodology to how things are laid out. And once you understand that methodology, you'll be able to find the information that you need pretty quickly. For the most part, the controls and indicators in the cockpit of a DC-6 are clustered together by function. The exception to this rule, of course, being the dimmer knobs and the lighting controls. Those are sort of scattered haphazardly around the flight deck, so we're going to do a whole tutorial session just on cockpit lighting. So the goal in this tutorial is to really help you get oriented and understand where to look when you need information or what controls control what. There's a lot of dials in this airplane, and really just don't be intimidated by that. We're going to walk you through this. All this will start to make sense before you even get around to starting the airplane. And once you've worked with it a little bit, the layout will actually make a whole lot of sense to you. So we're going to work our way across the flight deck from left to right, and then we'll go across the top of the overhead panel. Over here on the left side of the flight deck, we've got a tablet. This tablet is something that we installed here in order to give you a way to control some of the interface between you and the simulator, which is fuel and maintenance and that sort of thing. Here on the left side of the panel is the captain's primary flight instruments. In the center, we've got all the engine instrumentation. On the right side of the cockpit, we've got the co-pilot's flight instruments. Down here across the very front of the throttle pedestal, you've got all your engine and fuel controls. You've got two sets of throttles on each side. All your propeller controls are located right here in the middle, and then you've got fuel controls sort of tucked in the front here. We'll get a better look at those a little bit later. As we look down, you'll notice a spot here on the left that's not textured. Just ignore that. The product's still in development at this stage. But this is a view of your pedestal. We've got your gust lock here for your flight controls so they don't get damaged blowing around in the wind. We've got the mixture controls that control the fuel to your engines. You've got landing gear, carburetor heat, flaps, some hydraulic controls, and then there's another one tucked here underneath the co-pilot seat. Underneath this red thing on the floor is your fuel dump, and this white wheel here is your aileron trim. Up here we have the gyro pilot. Occasionally you'll hear me and others refer to this as an autopilot. It is not. This is a gyro pilot. It does many of the similar functions, altitude and heading hold, that sort of thing, but it's a gyro pilot. Over here on the left side of the pedestal, you've got a little red knob there you can see. That's your parking brake. You're going to want to use that during engine run-ups for sure. On the sides of the pedestals here, you can see we've got trim knobs, or wheels really. As we look up to the overhead panel, speaking of trim wheels, folks often wonder what this is right here. That's your rudder trim. And you're going to get to use this quite a bit as we get into engine failure scenarios, so I'm looking forward to that. Moving up over here to the left eyebrow panel, we've got your test functions for all your fire detection and suppression. Those are sort of clustered together right over here. Along the top of the combing panel here, you've got all your fire indicators. Those will light up with a pleasing sounding bell if you've got bad problems. Up here, you've got a couple of light dimmers, some temperature control knobs for your anti-icing, and you'll notice that this spot right here, a couple of dimmer knobs, they're just sort of jammed into open real estate, and that's what I was talking about earlier about the dimmers being sort of scattered about. Moving on, we've got the left eyebrow panel here. This is your anti-ice controls, and all of these switches along the bottoms. This is the ways you protect the airplane from accumulating ice. It's all done through gas heaters. These indicators right here help you diagnose that your heaters are functioning and that they're performing well. You've also got your pitot heat right here. These small dials here, these are your fluid quantity indicators, things like oil and hydraulic fluid and your anti-detonation fluids that the engines consume at high power. A little bit lower, the big dials, these are your fuel tanks. The top row are your main tanks, the bottom row is your auxiliary tanks. Got light switches, got your cowl flap switches here for engine cooling management. Over here you've got your supercharger switches and a row of radios across the bottom to sort of make up the rest of the stack. And on the topic of radios, let's take a look back down here at the pedestal. You'll notice I skipped over this area here and this area here. These are the original radios from when the airplane was put in service in 1952. The technology is very outdated. They've been deprecated, but they've been left in there because it's a lot of work to take them out. So we modeled them as still being there, even though they're non-functional. These are the radios that you'll use during the course of flight. Continuing on now, the upper right eyebrow panel. This is your pressurization and cabin temperature controls right here. You can keep things nice and cool or warm and toasty depending on what your preferences are. A little bit further on the right here, this is your electrical system diagnostic panel, and we'll dive into that a little bit as we get into discussing some of the advanced systems. Moving to the overhead panel now, these are your feathering controls for engines 1 and 2 on this side over here, and then engines 3 and 4, your feathering controls over here. These are your ignition switches, your starter switches, electrical generators, emergency power. These are your AC inverters for the equipment that needs AC power. These are your fuel switches, both main and auxiliary. Again, a bunch of dimmer knobs, more light switches. Up here we've got water injection pumps for operating the engines at high power. Those are a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to showing you how those work. Over here on this side we have oil dilution. You'll use those in cold environments. A bunch of circuit breakers for the fuel pumps. These switches right up here, they control the spark inside the magnetos. Up here we've got controls for the prop anti-ice system and some test equipment here to make sure that it's all functioning properly. Over here on this side we've got a placard here. This is actually a pretty handy little tool so that you don't have to go digging through the manuals to figure out what your takeoff and landing speeds are. You just simply glance up here at this placard and that'll give you all the information you need. We'll show you how that works when we get into the flying part of the tutorials. Now back here, this part of the cockpit's not finished. It's still under work, so ignore all the light leaks and that sort of stuff. But what we're looking at here are circuit breaker panels. All the circuit breakers function. We've modeled all of them on the airplane. They're pretty straightforward to use, and basically on is up and down is open. So if you come along and you see one of these breakers is in a down position like this, it would mean that that breaker has popped, and depending on what your checklist tells you, you might come back and reset it once, usually only once. If it continues to pop, that's an indication of a problem. This little placard over here, we can zoom in on, will help you locate circuit breakers if you're not sure exactly where they are. You just glance at that placard, it'll tell you where to look. So that's pretty much it. Congratulations, you've completed your orientation tour of the flight deck of the DC-6. Now you can go back and watch this over as many times as you want until some of the layout starts to kind of gel in your head. Normally in a tutorial this would be where we'd start to dive into all kinds of deep and esoteric system knowledge, like how many amps this switch will hold and that sort of thing. What we're going to do instead is we're going to skip right along forward. We're going to run you through a few things that'll get you flying because, let's face it, that's what we all want to do. So we're going to get you right into flying. We're going to use the automated flight engineer to help facilitate that process, make it easy for you. Then once we've got you flying the airplane and get you settled in a little bit comfortable, we're going to come back and then we'll start to really dig into some of the depth of the system so you can see just how deeply we've modeled this airplane, and I think that'll be a lot of fun for you. So for now, thanks for flying with PMDG. We really appreciate your business. We hope that this has been enjoyable for you, and we'll see you again real soon.